as you mentioned, there is a segment of the kind of liberal media establishment that are freaking out, and not just amongst the liberal establishment, but also the conservative media.
Yeah.
For example, we have the great Andrew Bolt here in Australia, on
Yep.
Sky News,
Yep.
who was having a complete and utter meltdown over Donald Trump the other day. And
So it's interesting because
if
you think he would have been the kind of character who would have
Yeah.
been on board.
But if you're upsetting Andrew Bolt and the ABC at the same time, I'm willing to listen to what you have to say.
That is very, very true. That is very, very true.
Look, I will just, before we end this segment, you did a great job summarising
Thank you.
USAID. However, I just think that Elon Musk has been able to summarise what's going on a lot more succinctly than you.
Look, fair enough.
I'm sorry.
He's a multi-billionaire. I can't blame him.
I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much. I'm living the meme. It's like there's living the dream and there's living the meme, and it's pretty much what's happening, you know.
I am become meme.
I'm become meme, the destroyer of worlds. That man's wild, dude.
Yeah.
I think he's really coming out the woodworks. All I'll say is I think there's a reason he's wearing sunnies the whole time now.
And a black MAGA hat.
Yes, and I think the reason he wears sunnies is the same reason Conor McGregor is always wearing sunnies.
Because he's high as
Because
a
he's
car.
high. And it would be blatantly obvious if we saw his eyeballs. Another thing to note before we move on, that CBAC conference, some absolute bangers came out of that.
Yes, you're right.
Comedic gold, one of them being Steve Bannon, who is an incredibly colourful character. How can we say this? He did a speech, and then at the end, he did an Elon Musk impersonation.
So not wearing sunnies and a black hat?
No, I'd say an Elon Musk impersonation.
Hand to chest
Hand
outright?
to chest, outright, extended, controversial, some might say.
That was. I would ask you to demonstrate, but
Yeah,
probably
a little
shouldn't.
bit too much, yeah.
Okay.
But it's great because, I mean, like, right-wing populism historically kind of typically ends in one way.
Yes.
And we are seeing it symbolically and literally with all these people doing all these outdated salutes, shall we say. Correct, yeah.
So before we wrap it up,
Yeah.
you wanted to discuss a little bit about...
Yeah.
This kind of ties back into what's happening with USAID.
Yes, it ties back into that last topic.
Your argument is that we're seeing now a transition
Yep.
from the old liberal imperial order
Yep.
to a more kind of hard power realpolitik order.
Yes, and I'd like to pre-frame this by saying that, like, people like, even when I say liberal world order, I don't necessarily mean Democrat Republican. I mean, like, the existing world order that we've had pretty much up until from 1945 onwards, which was based on this premise of liberal democracy. Like, for example, like a Ronald Reagan character.
Yeah. And the institutions.
And the
tie into that.
institutions,
the
exactly.
IMF, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, those kinds of
Thank
things.
you, perfectly.
Yeah.
NATO, for example,
And
NATO's a big part of that, and that's
Correct.
what I wanted to talk about, because at the moment, there has been kind of a rapprochement between the United States and Russia.
Yep.
So there's been talks. I believe they're looking at ending the Ukraine war, which is good. I think that is inherently a good thing. I don't really care who does it. I think the people of Ukraine have suffered enough.
Yep.
Obviously, we're seeing the US has moved on. They're not doing this whole liberal world order thing anymore.
No.
Europe hasn't got the memo. So the Europeans are freaking out. We've seen Sir Keir on the gear Starmer, British Prime Minister. He's freaking out. He's saying, well, look, we're going to send troops to Ukraine. I'm not
Peacekeeping task force. 60,000 troops.
He's saying similar rhetoric from the Germans.
Yeah.
And there is a large freak out. So the European kind of elite class doesn't really know how to take this. So we recently had the Munich Security Conference recently. And we had like JD Vance, the US
Vice President.
Vice President, VP, who I think is an incredibly good orator.
He seems like a statesman.
He's a very intelligent man. He's a very good orator, and he gave a pretty impressive speech, I have to say, where he kind of just eviscerated the Europeans.
Yeah.
He was saying, he's like, look, we don't, and this is, again, following the political trends happening in Europe, where the Germans are trying to stifle the AfD.
Yeah.
You know, like Maloney's party got heaps of criticism. So it's kind of this right-wing populist,
Yeah.
Gonna steal, it works every time, you know. It's not controlled by billionaires or anything. But where this political wave sweeps through, and the current kind of liberal order of the EU are all kind of trying to resist it. So like Romania, for example, Slovakia, even though they're not even necessarily right-wing, but they're kind of not on board with the EU thing, and they're just getting targeted relentlessly. So Jordie Vance has come out and he's kind of done the speech, and he essentially said to the Europeans, like, you guys aren't democracies.
Yep.
You are stifling, free speech. You're stifling prayer. You've let all these immigrants in, kind of criticising them, and all these kind of talking points that we've come to expect.
Yep.
The Europeans are really upset about this. So,
Yes.
like Olaf Scholz, the German PM or president, Chancellor.
Yeah.
You've had all these kind of like Pistorius, the German defense minister. All these guys have come out and they've started had rebuttal speeches like, you can't tell us about democracy, rah rah rah. And also Pete Hegseth has come out, and I just wanted to show you what he said.
The bloodshed must stop, and this war must end. We will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace by coupling allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield. We're also here today to directly and unambiguously express that stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe. The United States faces consequential threats to our homeland. We must and we are focusing on security of our own borders. The United States remains committed to the NATO alliance and to the defense partnership with Europe. Full stop. But the United States will no longer tolerate an imbalanced relationship which encourages dependency. The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5.
Interesting.
So what he's saying, in essence, is everything we've been saying to you for the last 3 years, specifically after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, everything we were saying beforehand, we're admitting that it was crap.
Yeah.
We're admitting it was bullshit.
Ukraine will not join NATO.
Ukraine will not join NATO. We're not going to support you in doing this anymore.
Yeah.
We're out. Look
Yeah.
after yourselves. And this is why I say I think it's a geopolitical and domestic political realignment, is because they're not wasting their time with Europe anymore. It served its purpose in the Cold War to front up to the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. Served its purpose. It became wealthy because it was, valuable to the United States. Now that is not the strategic center of the world, whereas we need to look at, I'd say, the Middle East and Asia.
He did say that now.
Yeah.
Other international things of other
International importance, yes. The Arctic as well, kind of these other spheres of influence that are going to open up. There's other areas of potential future conflict. Europe's not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say this as well. It's kind of sad, but this is kind of funny. So this gentleman is, his name is Christoph Heusgen, and he is the chair of the Munich Security Conference.
After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelensky. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Hang on. James.
This poor man.
Is that a grown man on stage crying?
Yes.
Because the United States are about to abandon the Europeans?
Yes, that's exactly what that is.
Wow.
That man is delusional.
Yeah.
Not delusional.
Okay.
He's not upset because I think the primary reason that he's upset And I actually think he's not being performative.
No, I
actually
think
think
he's
that's sincere tears.
They are not crocodile tears.
No, they're not
They're
crocodiles.
real.
But I think the reason it's not because they're getting abandoned. It's because everything that he believed and built his entire foundations of his existence on have just come crashing down.
Yeah.
Hilarious content, and this is why the New Republicans, they're terrible, but hilarious because they have content like this going out.
Right.
But as part of this, a really interesting. So this is why I think it's part of the U.S. Political and geopolitical strategic realignment. That's across everything essentially. So it's across the domestic ruling class in the United States.
Yeah.
It's going to be across their economic structure domestically in the United States, and it's going to be their strategy geopolitically across the world. And I think these are all being changed all at once.
Yeah.
And all of these things, the funding cuts, the restructuring of the government, USAID, the rhetorical end of woke, that sort of stuff, that's all part of it.
Yeah.
And this is a big thing. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, is the way the Americans have framed this, that they're kind of saying, you Europeans, I'm paraphrasing, you Europeans are not democratic, you're stifling political parties, arresting journalists. Interesting to note, J.D. Vance did say you are stifling dissenting voices on the far left and the far right, which I did think was interesting. He did mention the far left because they are far more stifled than the far right. The far right generally gets a free pass in Europe, where they are currently, arresting pro-Palestinian journalists, for example. Yep. Yet you see neo-Nazi groups walking the streets in Europe and holding anti-immigrant rallies very regularly. Yep. Again, just for example. But what they've done, and the rhetoric that they're framing this is, the rhetoric with which they are framing this is that you guys are undemocratic and you have pulled us into this Ukraine war.
Yep.
And now we're pulling out because we're done with it.
Yep. And
we're not going to fight your stupid little wars anymore.
Yep.
This is profoundly untrue. Europe, in its modern formation, I need to stress this, in its modern formation, is a direct product of the US empire.
Yep.
In the post-World War II era, Europe, its current formation, the European Union, the financial system, the way the militaries are structured, it has all been completely dictated by the United States within the
through the Marshall Plan that reconstructed Western Europe after World War II.
And to operate within the acceptable boundaries of what the US would tolerate, essentially. There's no... And obviously they've talked about how Europe tried to interfere. They're like, Europeans are interfering in American democracy. I believe what J.D. Vance meant when he referenced that was the Keir on the Gear Starmer, his Labour Party, sent a delegation to advise the Kamala Harris team. Two wrongs don't make a right. I don't know what either of them were thinking. Pardon me. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some covert military operations that the United States has intervened in Europe since 1945 with some help from the UK. You've got Italy, 1947, Greece, essentially the British and the Americans went in and fought the communists who actually defeated the Nazis, occupied Greece. Albania, Eastern Europe as a whole, supporting subverting popular socialist governments, working with Nazis in Ukraine and Hungary. The whole division of Germany as a nation by the United States, Operation Gladio, CIA-backed drug smuggling, propping up the Corsican Mafia, the Sicilian Mafia, destroying all left-wing groups, false flag attacks, killing politicians, Albania, Bulgaria, the Balkanization of the Balkans, the destruction of Yugoslavia, the creation of Kosovo. Like, they have every step of the way been driving this ship forwards. Now they don't want to be on the ship anymore as it's crashing into the rocks. They're getting out. Europe has essentially, especially so gleefully accepting this, is they have decimated their own economy. They don't have access to gas anymore. They didn't stop the US from destroying the Middle East, which is the cause of this migration crisis. And as there are over 65,000 US soldiers based in Europe in over 38 bases. There's no European countries have bases in the US.
But really, it's just the United States saying now that the Europeans have to actually burden the cost of the empire.
Burden the cost of the empire and
start paying
sort yourselves out. Because again, it's not like the Americans are saying you're responsible for yourselves now, but they're not going to leave them alone. If the Europeans go in a direction the Americans don't want them to go, the Americans are still going to be there to whip them back in line. Those military bases aren't going anywhere, but they're just saying we're not going to pursue this version of imperialism that you guys have been enacting. Because this is what's led to the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
And just to wrap up, young Zelensky is not invited to the peace talks.
No.
Right. This to me proves that why would you invite a man who isn't relevant to the peace talks? So it's going to be the US and Russia, but Russia's at war with Ukraine, Jordie, not the US. No, they're at war with the US and NATO. That was the whole purpose of it, and this just demonstrates
Ukraine's
that.
just the proxy.
Ukraine's the proxy. And poor Zelensky, I do kind of feel sorry for him. He's sold out his entire country. He's destroyed a whole generation of young men. And I bet right now...
But he's going to be able to go and retire in a mansion in the Hamptons.
Oh, I think that's I honestly think it's getting more and more unlikely. I think if the Dems were in, he would.
Nah, he's getting out.
We'll see. All I will say is that we can have to look at the history of other... some of the US's other popular proxy war leaders, like the gentleman in South Vietnam, whose name I can never... Diem Gen Pho, or pardon my language. It's not Diem Pho. Diem, sorry, you're right. Killed CIA assassins. Other classics like Saddam Hussein, who was essentially did the bidding of the US in terms of going to war with Iran.
Manuel Noriega,
most famously Osama bin Laden. All these men were American trained, funded, and did the US's bidding at one time, and they all ended up dead by the hands of the US. Just as Europe has done the United States' bidding, now they are screwed. I want to use this point to demonstrate the imperial hegemon does not have allies. It has vassals and subservient states. And once you have exhausted your usefulness, you'll be tossed aside. And the same thing will happen to Australia. To wrap it up and bring it round to the AUKUS point we made earlier in the show. Anyways, there's a lot to mull over. Heaps of more exciting stuff happening in the future.
Definitely. So, no, great episode. That was a really good segment. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Next week, we will be doing a live stream on Sunday with Ken from Make Tech. We are going to be picking his brain, a man that understands renewable energies and technologies a lot better than we do.
Definitely. Way smarter than, or me, probably not you, but me, definitely.
No, he's a very switched on man when it comes to this, and we'd like to pick his brain on the nuclear policy that the Liberal Party are running on. And have went nuclear on.
Just in case you thought that 368 for subs wasn't enough, 660 for nuclear. Not bad. Bargain.
So, yes, we'll be doing a live stream with Ken.
So tune in. We'll announce details, times, all that sort of stuff a bit throughout the week. No worries.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Please like, share, subscribe, and join us next Sunday for the live stream.
Lots of loves. Hugs and kisses.